I'm back in Disneyland with another lens to play with. Some of my favorite lenses to play with in Disneyland are portrait lenses and long, fast primes. And so I found another one. I found something that's actually a little older. It's out of production. It is a Olympus Zuiko 4/3 format lens, not a micro 4/3, but a 4/3. And so I need to use an adapter with it. But it is a 150 millimeter f2. So that means on a micro 4/3 body that has a 300 millimeter equivalent focal length with an f2 aperture. That's a lot of reach, and that's a pretty fast aperture to be able to have a shallow depth of field and to let in a lot of light in low light situations. So I'm going to walk around the park today with it, and I'm going to see how it performs. I'm going to do a lot of the same stuff I usually do, and we're going to see how this new lens, new to me, I bought it used, we're going to see how this lens stacks up to some of the things I like to do to my lenses. One of the things a lot of people online have not complained about but mentioned is because this is such a huge lens with a huge piece of glass and a very fast aperture, it was designed for portraiture, and so it might not have the fast focusing that some people might expect from modern lenses. I'm going to see how that focusing speed actually works out here in a theme park environment. I think out in full sunlight like we have today out here on the river or on something like Jungle Cruise during the day, I don't think it's going to struggle. Generally, lenses do pretty decent when they have good light, but I'm going to take it on Haunted Mansion, I'm going to take it on Indy, I'm going to take it on Pirates, I'm going to take it on Pinocchio, and we're going to see how it does in low light. Will it be able to focus fast enough? Will it be able to focus at all? And what kind of images am I going to get with that f2 aperture? F2 is a little bit slower than what I usually use. I usually like to use f1.2 lenses. This is more than a stop slower than that. So we're going to see how it works. Because this lens does focus relatively slowly, you see this on a lot of the big super telephoto lenses, it has a focus limiter switch. So the minimum focus distance on this lens is 1.4 meters, 5.5, 6 feet. But you can actually reduce that down to 4 meters to save yourself a little time so the lens doesn't hunt as much in low light. Because this lens is so heavy, I've gone back to the wider strap that I used to use on my EM1X, and that actually makes this lens relatively comfortable to carry around. It's not that heavy. I can still one-hand it relatively well, so it's not completely unmanageable. Again, it's one of the virtues of the micro 4/3 system. If this was a Canon 300 millimeter f2.8, I would not be able to one-arm this on a full-frame body. So being able to just do that and get 300 millimeter f2 is kind of cool. I kind of like it. The first thing I did this morning was to jump on Indiana Jones right at rope drop because it was only a posted 25-minute wait. That's the shortest wait you're going to see all day. And actually, I only ended up waiting for 15 minutes because I showed up right at rope drop. I wanted to give this lens a really hard test first thing in the morning. And there's really only one part of Indiana Jones where a lens this long and this slow to focus really can do anything. And that's the scene near the end where Indy is hanging from the rope before the ball rolls down. And fortunately, I got lucky enough where we didn't get stopped there. That would have been sweet. But the ride had a little bit of an issue, and so cars were coming up to that area and lingering for 30 or 40 seconds before the effect would play. And so I actually got a couple of really, really good shots, close-up portrait shots of Indy's face as he's hanging from the rope. This was a pretty challenging shot, and it's a really rare shot. I mean, most days I would not be able to get that shot because usually the car is bucking up and down and moving a lot, and it's just really, really hard. The longer your focal length, the more difficult shots like that are going to be to get. And even if you're using both hands and trying to stabilize the camera, just a little bit of wiggle here at 300 effective millimeters is going to make it really hard to keep anything in focus. The next ride I took the lens on was Jungle Cruise. First I stopped in the exit to Indy, and part of the Indy exit overlooks the first part of the Jungle Cruise where you see the tiger and the snakes and the statue that's overgrown with trees. And so you can get some really good shots from the exit of Indy. And then I jumped on the ride, and Jungle Cruise is one of those rides that almost any lens you have, you're going to be able to get some kind of a shot. So I tried to focus on the longer, more telephoto shots. I'm not sure if they're going to come out any better than the shots I get with any other lens. That f2 aperture doesn't really mean a whole lot in the middle of the day when there's plenty of light, it'll let me keep my ISO 2 or 3 stops lower than it would have normally been. It focused fast enough, not as fast as some of my other lenses, so it wouldn't be my go-to lens for jungle cruise. I think like a 70 to 200 millimeter f2.8 zoom would be the best thing for jungle cruise. The next ride I took the lens on was Haunted Mansion. Again, something really, really dark. It's a slower moving ride, but it's really, really dark. And this lens doesn't like to focus in Haunted Mansion. There are a couple of spots. I think I got it to focus on the candelabra in the endless hallway. I think I got some decent shots of the organ player in the ballroom, but you kind of need those scenes where the subject is a little farther away and you're moving past it kind of slowly. A lot of the shots in the attic, I would have loved to have gotten more detailed shots of some of the objects in the new attic scene. The guy in the coffin at the beginning, he's moving sideways a little too fast to be able to shoot it. So Haunted Mansion is not the best with this lens. It can get some shots, but you really got to work at them. All right, well now I think I'm gonna head back across to the mainland, and I think I'm gonna jump over to California Adventure, maybe try a few things over there. This time of year, the usual parades aren't running, like Magic Happens, so they are running a Lunar New Year parade with Milan over here in California Adventure. So I wanted to test this lens out in a parade because that's one of the things I really am looking forward to using it in, and this is the only kind of parade that was going on today, so I came over here to shoot that, and it does do really well with parades. One of the things I was excited about was that f2 aperture and that long focal length, letting me get a little more subject isolation than I've been getting in the past with my other zoom lenses, because they have smaller apertures, and so you get a little more depth of field in the image. And so sometimes the performers in the parade would blend into the background, so I wanted to see if I could isolate the subjects, make them pop a little more, throw that background out of focus. So I wanted to keep this locked at f2 to maximize that shallow depth of field, but because it's so bright today, I had to shoot at a shutter speed of 1/12,000th of a second, which is only possible with electronic shutter. You can't do that with a manual shutter on this camera, so that's a nice option to have, because I didn't have a neutral density filter, so fortunately I could do it with just manipulating the shutter speed. One of the other things I did over here in California Adventure is to take this lens on the Little Mermaid ride, and that was a challenging one because this lens is a little too long for that ride. There were only a few scenes where I was able to actually get a subject in focus and get a few shots before either I moved too close for the subject to overflow the frame, or it moved behind the ride vehicle. These clamshell type rides, Little Mermaid and Haunted Mansion, the ride vehicle forces you to look in a certain direction, and so sometimes you want to keep photographing a subject as you move past it and get different angles, but the ride vehicle rotates and you can't do that. So it's kind of an additional challenge with an already challenging lens. One of the things I'm coming to realize with this lens, because it has such a tight field of view, I have to break off and stop shooting a subject before I'm really maybe done with it, because I'm not going to have time to then turn and recompose and get focus lock on the next subject that's coming up in the ride. Sometimes I'll shoot a subject till I'm happy with it, and then when the angle's no longer right, or I'm too far away or too close, then I'll turn to the next thing that I know is coming. And I find it with this lens, that subject is either already out of focus, it's too close to focus, the angle is wrong. So the more challenging a lens is, the more important it is that you have the ride memorized. If you've ridden these things hundreds of times, it makes it easier. You know what's coming next, and have your camera settings down by heart, so you know exactly how to change a setting if you need to on the fly. All right, so I'm pretty much done with California Adventure for the day, so I decided to head back over here to Disneyland because there's some stuff here that I still haven't photographed with this lens that I want to. So it's the middle of the afternoon, ride times are pretty long, so rather than jump in line for a ride, I'm gonna head over to Fantasyland and then Galaxy's Edge and look for some characters to photograph and see, kind of similar to photographing the parade. I want to see how well we can make a subject pop against an out of focus background. That was actually pretty productive. I saw a lot of people. I saw Gaston and Flynn Rider having some kind of bro-off. Rapunzel was trying to break the fight up, so that was pretty hilarious. And then I headed over to Galaxy's Edge. I saw Kylo Ren, I saw 2 stormtroopers, and I saw Din Djarin and Grogu. So it does a slightly better job than some of my other lenses at isolating the subject from the background. It focuses fast enough, but it does lose focus a little too easily, and I'm not sure if that's because it has that extra shallow depth of field, so it doesn't take much for something to come out of focus, and then it gets confused and starts to hunt. So I'm constantly having to be on and off the shutter to recompose and refocus. But it does pretty well. I'm pleased with it so far. Moving on, I think I'm going to head over to ride some rides now. I want to take this lens over to Pirates of the Caribbean because that is my favorite dark ride for photography, because even though it's a dark ride, the fact that the subjects are very well lit and the ride moves very slow and it's like a 10-minute ride, all those things make it really, really fun for taking photos. So let's go get in line. I think this lens can photograph some of the things on Pirates fairly well. With lenses with this much reach, it's not just a matter of the lens giving you more reach. It also lets you get different angles, and so you kind of have to think about what things are about to come into view and kind of almost be ready before the subject comes into view so you can focus on it and start shooting, because sometimes you might only have a few seconds before it's too close or moving too fast or the angle is wrong. So it's definitely, every time I get a longer lens, it kind of resets my learning curve, and I have to retrain myself for how I think about my approach to shooting different rides. But I like some of the stuff I got on Pirates. So after Pirates, I went over to the Adventureland Treehouse. And one of the cool things about this lens, the long reach and the wide aperture, lets me get right up next to the mesh netting that separates you from the interior rooms. And I can photograph some of the details in the rooms, and you don't see the mesh in the shot. So I could get some details on some of the books in the daughter's room and in the mother's music room. So that was kind of fun. Another great venue for this lens is the Tiki Room. It gives you a lot of reach, and you can actually get nice tight portraits of all of the birds, and the aperture is wide enough that you'll get plenty of light, so you don't have to keep your ISO too high, because sometimes the denoising software can't tell what's texture and what's noise, and so it smooths out everything. So if I can keep my ISO low when I'm shooting very, very detailed fabrics, feathers, fur, that kind of stuff, all the better. So yeah, try it in the Tiki Room. And now that I've had my rest break in the Tiki Room, it's time to go get on the Jungle Cruise again and try this lens shooting Jungle Cruise at night and see what we can find. This ought to be fun. Jungle Cruise at night is difficult to photograph. The number one thing you need to remember if you're trying to photograph Jungle Cruise at night is be patient. Try going late at night when there's not a long line so you can go over and over and over, because not only is it dark, a lot of the subjects are not lit at all with their own lighting. They're lit by the spotlights on the boat, so sometimes they are only illuminated for a second or two if they're lit up at all. And so you got to kind of learn what the skipper shines their light on and what they don't shine their light on. Each skipper is different because the skippers can control the lights. They'll turn the lights on, they'll turn the lights off to make their own show. So sometimes you'll be expecting to be able to see something and shoot it, and you won't be able to, and you're out of luck. You just got to try something else. So I ended up watching both shows of Fantasmic, and this lens I think is going to be my preferred tool for shooting Fantasmic. I'm real happy with how these turned out. Between the combination of reach and aperture just is going to give me really, really sharp, clean images. Most of the subjects are lit really, really well, and so the ISO can stay relatively low at f2, a lot lower than my other lenses that I'm usually shooting at f like 6.3, so that's like 3+ stops. That's 8 or 9 times more light that this lens is letting in than the other lenses I usually shoot Fantasmic with, my 12-200 or my 100-400. So this I think is going to be a game changer. So I went and tried to do a few different Fantasyland rides using the lens with varying degrees of success. I first jumped on Pinocchio's Daring Journey, which is a notoriously difficult ride for me to shoot anyway. It's very dark, everything's close to the ride vehicle. It has a lot of very sharp left and right twists and turns. And so the 150mm lens did not do very well. I was just trying to focus on everything I could, just find a target, try to focus, shoot a few frames, transition to another target. try to get focus, shoot a few frames. And every now and then I got lucky and the camera actually did lock focus on something and I did get a somewhat sharp shot, but because the lens is only f2, I think the ISO is going to probably be on the higher end because I was still trying to get about a 1/160th of a second for shutter speed. And so even if the images are focused properly, they might be a little noisier. And then I went on Peter Pan and had pretty much the same thing. I got what looks like a decently focused shot of Tiger Lily, but again, it was just trying to focus on a target, realizing that I wasn't going to get focused on that target, and then try to figure out where the next subject was going to be and try to shoot that. So not very successful. And then the third one that I went on was Storybook Land canal boats, which is kind of fun. There's a lot of straight runs at targets, and so as the boat's traveling in a straight line, you can kind of look around and pick something in the distance that you're moving towards. And the lens does a decent job of tracking on something that's moving straight towards it, especially at the slow speed that they were driving the Storybook Land boat. All right, it is midnight. It is time to leave the park, and it is time to go home. Let's summarize. Am I glad that I bought this lens? It was quite expensive, even though it was used. A lot of their user reviews said that it was slow to focus, so I took a lot of risk buying it for theme park photography. I think the risk paid off. I think it definitely has a place in my bag for theme park photography. I'm definitely going to be bringing it again. It's great for things like Fantasmic. It's great for things like parades. It's great for character hunting. It is not good on fast-moving, very dark rides. Indiana Jones, Haunted Mansion, Space Mountain. Also, I've heard that it doesn't autofocus very well on contrast detect bodies. So if you have an EM5 or an EM10, it might not autofocus for you. But if you have an EM1, an EM1X, an OM1, something with phase detect, it worked great. So I think that's about it. Should you buy this lens if you're interested? Maybe. If you have a lot of experience with telephoto lenses and fast primes already, and you're looking for something to expand on the capabilities you already have, similar to what I did, then yeah, I think it's going to be really fun for you. If you don't have a lot of experience with telephoto lenses, I'd say get some experience with something in the 60, 75, 85, 90 millimeter, 100 millimeter focal length, and make sure that works for you. If you don't have a decent basis in some of that technique, and you bring something like this to the park, you're probably setting yourself up for a lot of disappointment. As it is, even probably the 12,000 images I shot today, I bet less than 5% of those are real keepers. It's not a high percentage lens, but dark ride photography isn't a very high percentage game, so that's just the way it is. That's why I love digital. And just throw away the ones I don't like and try again next time. So I think that's it. I think I'm going to sign off. I have no idea how long this video is going to be, so if you're still watching, thank you very much. I hope to do more videos like this soon, more lens reviews, more using one lens for the whole day in the park. I think that's kind of fun, finding what works for different situations. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.